A serious White House signal on the $2,000 payment. For months now, many seniors, retirees, and families living on fixed incomes have been asking the same question. Is that $2,000 payment actually going to happen, or is it just political talk? Today, we finally have something more concrete to discuss, and this time, the signal is coming directly from the White House. According to a newly released update, the administration is no longer speaking in vague terms or distant possibilities. A senior White House economic advisor has confirmed that the idea of a $2,000 payment, what the president has consistently referred to as a dividend payment rather than a stimulus check, is now being seriously evaluated under current economic conditions. This is important because the terminology matters. By calling it a dividend, the administration is framing this payment as a return to American households from tariff revenues collected through trade policy, not as emergency relief like the pandemic-era stimulus checks. That distinction could make a major difference in how the proposal is presented to Congress and how it is perceived by the public. Even more significant is the timing. The advisor explained that while there was uncertainty earlier in the year about whether the federal budget could support such payments, the situation has changed. Strong economic growth, reduced deficits, and recent budget surpluses have reopened the door to this idea in a very real way. For retirees and seniors who rely on predictable income, this marks the first meaningful shift from speculation to structured planning, and it sets the stage for everything that comes next. Why this $2,000 payment is different from past stimulus checks. One of the most important things for seniors to understand is that this proposed $2,000 payment is not being positioned the same way as previous stimulus checks, and that difference could significantly affect who qualifies and how the program moves forward. In past years, stimulus checks were passed during emergencies, economic shutdowns, job losses, and national crises. This time, the administration is making a very different argument. They are describing this payment as a dividend tied to revenue generated from tariffs and trade agreements rather than borrowed money or deficit spending. Why does that matter? Because politically and economically, a dividend sounds far more sustainable. It signals that the government is not handing out emergency aid, but rather returning excess revenue to American households. For retirees living on fixed incomes, this framing increases the likelihood that lawmakers view the payment as fiscally responsible instead of reckless spending. Another key distinction is that this proposal is being discussed during a period of economic strength, not weakness. The White House advisor pointed to several factors: steady economic growth approaching 4%, a sharply reduced federal deficit, and multiple months of budget surplus. These are conditions that simply did not exist when earlier stimulus checks were issued. For seniors, this changes the conversation entirely. It means this payment is not about employment status, not about workforce participation, and not about emergency hardship alone. It is about income levels and economic participation as Americans. This shift in framing is critical, and it sets the groundwork for understanding who may qualify and why. The $100,000 income threshold explained clearly now. Let's address the single most important detail in this entire proposal: the $100,000 income threshold. This figure has been mentioned repeatedly by administration officials, and it appears to be the central qualifying factor for the $2,000 payment. Here's what seniors need to understand clearly and without confusion. This proposal is not based on whether you work, not based on whether you file taxes regularly, and not based on the type of benefits you receive. It is based almost entirely on income level. According to the information shared so far, households earning under $100,000 per year would fall within the eligibility range. What has not yet been finalized is whether that figure refers strictly to individual income or total household income, or whether there will be phase-outs similar to past stimulus programs. But the threshold itself has remained consistent in every update. This is especially important for retirees and seniors receiving Social Security. Many people assume that because they are not working or do not file traditional tax returns, they are automatically excluded. That is not the case. If your total income, including Social Security benefits, pensions, or disability payments, falls below the $100,000 mark, you would likely qualify. For seniors living on fixed incomes, this is a crucial clarification. The system is not asking whether you are employed. It is asking whether your income meets the threshold. That distinction alone opens the door for millions of older Americans. Understanding this point now will prevent confusion and unnecessary anxiety later as this proposal continues to take shape. Social Security, SSI, SSDI, you are not automatically excluded. One of the biggest misconceptions surrounding this $2,000 payment is the fear among seniors that receiving Social Security or disability benefits somehow disqualifies them. That concern has been raised repeatedly, and it deserves a clear, direct answer. Based on everything that has been stated so far, receiving Social Security does not automatically exclude you. The same is true for SSI, SSDI, and other disability-based benefits. The proposal is not designed around employment status, tax filing history, or benefit type. It is designed around income. This is critical for retirees who live on fixed monthly checks. Whether you are receiving Social Security retirement benefits, supplemental security income, Social Security disability insurance, or a combination of these programs, the determining factor remains the same: your total income level. If your annual income stays under the $100,000 threshold, current guidance suggests you would likely be eligible for the payment. That applies whether you worked in the past, whether you are currently working part-time, or whether you have not worked in years. Another important clarification is this: filing a tax return is not a requirement for eligibility, although it may become part of the process to deliver payments efficiently. Many seniors who do not normally file taxes were still able to receive previous payments once special filing options were made available. For older Americans who have been unsure where they stand, this part of the proposal should bring a measure of relief. The system is not targeting you for exclusion. It is recognizing income reality. Veterans, disabled Americans, and the unemployed. Where you stand beyond Social Security recipients, there are several other groups who have been asking an important question. Does this $2,000 payment apply to me as well? Based on the current information coming from the White House, the answer for many is yes, if your income qualifies. Veterans receiving VA benefits are not excluded under this proposal. Whether you are retired, partially employed, or living entirely on disability compensation, eligibility would still depend on your total annual income, not the source of that income. If your combined earnings and benefits remain under the $100,000 threshold, you would likely be included. The same principle applies to Americans living with disabilities. This includes individuals receiving SSDI, veterans' disability benefits, or other long-term disability support. The proposal does not attempt to measure work capacity or employment status. It focuses strictly on income level, which simplifies eligibility and reduces unnecessary barriers. Unemployed workers also fall into this conversation. If you have lost your job, had your hours reduced, or experienced a drop in income that now places you under the qualifying threshold, you could be eligible as well. In fact, for many households, unemployment or reduced wages may make qualification more likely than in prior years. This consistent income-based approach is one of the strongest aspects of the proposal. It acknowledges economic reality rather than labels, categories, or assumptions. For millions of Americans outside the traditional workforce, that distinction makes all the difference. Parents and families. The possibility of additional support. Another group closely watching this proposal is families with children. While much of the attention has focused on seniors and fixed-income households, parents are also asking whether this $2,000 payment could include additional amounts for dependents, similar to previous stimulus programs. At this stage, no official confirmation has been made regarding extra payments per child. However, history gives us some important context. In prior stimulus efforts, Congress frequently included supplemental payments for dependents, recognizing the higher financial pressure on households raising children. If lawmakers choose to follow that same framework, families under the $100,000 income threshold could potentially see more than the base $2,000 amount. That said, it is critical to be clear and responsible here. This part of the proposal remains unconfirmed. There has been discussion, but no finalized language. For families, especially those balancing childcare, education expenses, and rising food costs, even the possibility of additional support matters. But this is where patience and preparation become important. The final details would only be known once an official proposal is introduced and legislative text is released. What families can do now is ensure their records are accurate. Tax returns should properly list all dependents. Income figures should reflect current reality, and IRS information should be kept up to date. If additional child-based payments are included, those records will matter. Until then, families should view this as a potential benefit, not a guarantee, but one that remains firmly on the table. Why economic conditions now support a $2,000 payment? One of the strongest arguments in favor of this proposed $2,000 payment is the current state of the U.S. economy. Unlike previous periods when stimulus checks were issued during financial emergencies, today's conditions present a very different picture. According to the White House economic advisor, the federal government has experienced multiple months of budget surplus, something that has not happened consistently in recent years. At the same time, the national deficit has been reduced by hundreds of billions of dollars compared to the previous year. These changes create fiscal space that simply did not exist before. Economic growth has also played a major role. With growth rates approaching 4%, the administration argues that the country is in a position to share economic gains directly with households, especially those living on fixed or limited incomes. This is where the dividend concept becomes central again. From a senior's perspective, this matters because it reframes the payment as a reward for economic stability rather than emergency aid. Lawmakers are far more likely to support a payment that aligns with strong financial indicators instead of one that increases long-term debt during uncertain times. In practical terms, these economic conditions give political cover to move forward. Officials can point to data, not speculation, when making the case. That makes the proposal easier to defend in Congress and more palatable to voters. For retirees and vulnerable households, this economic backdrop increases the odds that the proposal moves from discussion to action. The congressional path, how this payment could actually pass. Understanding how this $2,000 payment could move through Congress is essential, especially for seniors who have seen many proposals stall or disappear over the years. This time, however, there is a clear legislative pathway that significantly improves the chances of success. Congress has already indicated plans to pass at least 2 additional reconciliation bills between now and early 2027. A reconciliation bill is a special type of legislation that allows major fiscal measures to pass the Senate with a simple majority of 51 votes, rather than the usual 60 votes required to overcome a filibuster. Why does this matter? Because it removes one of the biggest obstacles to passing large financial programs. If this $2,000 payment is included in a reconciliation package, lawmakers would not need broad bipartisan support. The party in power could pass it on their own, assuming party unity holds. This exact process was used recently to pass large-scale tax and spending legislation. It is a proven tool, not a theoretical one. That makes this proposal far more realistic than many past promises that lacked a viable legislative route. For seniors watching from the sidelines, this explains why officials are speaking with greater confidence now. The mechanism exists. The votes may exist. And the timeline aligns with political priorities. While nothing is guaranteed, the reconciliation pathway transforms this idea from a hopeful discussion into a practical possibility. The political timing, why early 2026 matters so much. Timing is everything in Washington, and that is especially true when it comes to large payments sent directly to the public. According to the White House economic advisor, the expected window for an official proposal is early 2026, and that detail is far more meaningful than it may initially sound. From a political standpoint, the first 6 weeks of the new year are critical. January through mid-February represents a narrow window before Congress fully shifts into midterm election mode. Once March arrives, legislative focus often moves away from major new proposals and toward campaigning. If the administration intends to make this $2,000 payment a centerpiece of its economic messaging, it must introduce the proposal before that shift happens. That urgency explains why officials are now speaking openly about timelines instead of vague future possibilities. For seniors and retirees, this means clarity is likely to come sooner rather than later. Either the proposal appears early in the year or its chances diminish significantly. That reality alone increases pressure on lawmakers to act quickly if they intend to follow through. This timing also aligns with reconciliation strategy. Introducing the proposal early allows Congress to fold it into broader fiscal legislation while political momentum is still strong. In short, Early 2026 is not an arbitrary estimate. It is a strategic deadline, and for households waiting on relief, that makes the next few weeks especially important to watch closely. When could payments actually reach your bank account? One of the most common questions from seniors and fixed-income households is simple and practical. If this gets approved, when would the money actually arrive? The answer requires separating proposal timing from payment reality. Even if the official proposal is introduced in early 2026, that does not mean checks or direct deposits would go out immediately. Congressional debate, committee review, and final votes all take time. Once a bill is passed, federal agencies must then implement the payment system. Based on realistic estimates, spring or early summer of 2026 is the earliest window for payments, assuming the proposal moves forward without major delays. That timeline aligns with how long it typically takes the IRS to process eligibility, verify income data, and distribute funds. For seniors, this distinction is crucial. This payment should not be factored into short-term budgeting or used to cover immediate expenses like rent or utilities. It remains a potential future benefit, not guaranteed income for the coming months. However, the fact that officials are now discussing delivery timelines at all is a meaningful development. It suggests internal planning has already begun, which only happens when proposals are taken seriously. The key takeaway is preparation, not expectation. Knowing when payments might arrive helps households plan responsibly while avoiding disappointment or financial risk. If the process stays on track, clarity and possibly funds would follow later in 2026. What seniors should do now to be ready? While nothing has been finalized yet, there are several practical steps seniors can take right now to avoid delays or complications if the $2,000 payment is approved. Preparation matters, especially for retirees who rely on timely and predictable income. First, filing your 2024 tax return as early as possible is one of the most important actions you can take. Even if you normally do not owe taxes or do not typically file at all, having a recent tax return on record helps the IRS verify income quickly and determine eligibility without confusion. Second, make sure your information with the IRS is fully up to date. That includes your mailing address, bank account details for direct deposit, and any recent changes to your household situation. If the government sends payments automatically, outdated information is one of the most common reasons funds are delayed. Third, seniors should be cautious about misinformation and scams. As soon as potential payments are discussed publicly, scammers become active. Remember this clearly. The IRS will never call, text, or email you asking for personal information to receive a payment. Any message like that should be treated as a scam. Finally, seniors should continue exploring existing assistance programs while waiting. Programs like SNAP, Medicaid, and energy assistance can provide immediate support. This proposed payment may help later, but help is available now. Being prepared does not mean assuming approval. It means protecting yourself if approval happens. Warning signs: scams, misinformation, and false promises. Whenever large payments are discussed publicly, especially ones involving seniors and fixed-income households, there is always a darker side that must be addressed: scams and misinformation, and unfortunately those risks increase the closer a proposal gets to becoming reality. History shows us a clear pattern. As soon as stimulus-style payments are mentioned, scammers move quickly. They use official-sounding language, fake IRS messages, and even phone calls pretending to offer early access or guaranteed approval. Seniors are often targeted because scammers assume they rely on government benefits. It is critical to be absolutely clear about this. There is no application process right now, and no government agency will ever contact you directly asking for personal or banking information to secure your payment. The IRS does not operate that way. Any message claiming otherwise should be ignored or reported. Misinformation can be just as harmful as outright scams. Social media posts, misleading videos, and exaggerated headlines can create false expectations and financial stress. Seniors may begin budgeting for money that has not yet been approved, which can lead to serious hardship. The safest approach is patience and verification. Trust only official government announcements or reliable sources that clearly separate confirmed facts from speculation. Protecting yourself now ensures that if this payment does move forward, you receive it safely, without risk or regret. Managing expectations: what this payment is and is not. At this stage, it is essential for seniors and fixed-income households to manage expectations carefully. While the information coming from the White House is the most concrete we have seen so far, this $2,000 payment is not guaranteed. Understanding that distinction protects both financial stability and peace of mind. There are still several points where this proposal could change. It could be delayed, modified, reduced, or ultimately not included in final legislation. That is the reality of the legislative process. Even when economic conditions appear favorable and political incentives are aligned, this payment should not be viewed as immediate relief or a replacement for ongoing income sources like Social Security, pensions, or retirement savings. It is a one-time potential benefit, not a permanent increase or recurring support. Treating it as guaranteed income before approval can lead to risky financial decisions. However, managing expectations does not mean ignoring progress. What makes this moment different is the level of specificity now being discussed: clear income thresholds, a defined legislative pathway, and a realistic timeline. Those details did not exist earlier. The healthiest approach is balance. Stay informed without becoming consumed. Prepare without depending on the money. If it arrives, it can help ease pressure. If it does not, your financial foundation remains intact. For seniors especially, stability matters more than speculation, and that perspective is key as this process continues. Why this update is the most encouraging. So far, for many seniors, this moment feels familiar. Promises have been made before, timelines have been suggested, and hopes have risen, only to fade away. That history is exactly why this latest update stands out as different and more credible than anything we have seen since last summer. What separates this update from earlier speculation is who delivered it and how it was framed. This information did not come from campaign rhetoric or anonymous sources. It came directly from a senior White House economic advisor, someone involved in budget planning and policy discussions at the highest level. Equally important is the shift in tone. Earlier in the year, the message was uncertainty. There may not be room in the budget. Now that message has changed to confidence. Confidence backed by measurable economic data, declining deficits, and sustained growth. That transition matters. For retirees and fixed-income households, credibility is everything. Words alone do not pay bills. But when officials begin outlining realistic pathways, acknowledging constraints, and naming specific timelines, it signals internal preparation rather than casual discussion. This does not guarantee approval, but it does indicate momentum, and momentum is what has been missing until now. Seniors who have been waiting for clarity finally have a reason to pay attention, not with blind optimism, but with cautious awareness. This update does not promise relief, it signals possibility, and at this stage, that distinction is meaningful. Final takeaway: stay ready, stay informed, stay grounded. As we bring this discussion to a close, it is important to return to what matters most for seniors and fixed-income households: clarity, stability, and preparation. The possibility of a $2,000 payment has moved closer to reality than ever before, but it remains a proposal, not a promise. What we know now is meaningful. There is a defined income threshold. There is a viable legislative pathway. There is a realistic timeline. And most importantly, there is confirmation from a senior White House economic advisor that the budget conditions may support such a payment. Those elements did not exist together in previous updates. At the same time, the responsible approach is restraint. This payment should not drive financial decisions, replace budgeting plans, or become something you rely on emotionally or financially. It is a potential bonus, not a foundation. For seniors, the best position is readiness without dependence. File taxes early if needed. Keep IRS information current. Protect yourself from scams. And continue using existing benefit programs that provide support today, not months from now. If this payment moves forward, being prepared ensures you receive it smoothly. If it does not, your financial stability remains intact. In uncertain times, information is power, but perspective is protection. Stay informed, stay cautious, and stay grounded. When the next official update arrives, clarity will follow. And when it does, you will be ready.